The final word.
The final word.
The final word. Yes, it is.
Final indeed.
The calm before the storm.
What you talking about, boss?
Training camp is where the storm begins.
I thought it was already storming over here, man.
Oh man, you gonna have to enlighten me, Law. Enlighten me.
Oh my goodness! Last week we was talking about Bootgate, and now you know the couple weeks before that. Well, a week before that we were talking about Parsons and Hooker. Yeah, man, it's been a lot of storms going on, man.
You got a point. You got you a nice old point right there, big dog.
And will we pay Steve Dangerous Lamb?
Yeah. So I guess it's always a storm in Dallas. It never rains.
It's always raining in Dallas, Texas, with the heat, triple digits.
So we have the man himself, the man of the year, Mr. Nick Harris. What's going on?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Nick, that's what
it's going good. You've been having a great year, man.
I've been trying. It's been it's crazy that we're looking up and it's already July 16th or whatever day it is right now. And time's flying, man. It's already 2024 season again. Feels like we were just at AT&T watching that Green Bay loss yesterday.
Yeah. Watching the pain, watching our heart get taken out our chest. But before we start the show, I was saying before the show, you've been having a good year, man. You're a homeowner. Your first full year with Dallas.com. Kind of give people your background. Everybody know you, but it's a few that don't. Can you tell us about just this year, man? It looked like it's been a great year, man.
Yeah, it's been great. Well, my background, I came from the college football recruiting world. I worked for 24/7 Sports and Rivals for 4 or 5 years. Was blessed to have so many great connections and relationships and work that I was able to do in that industry. And you guys know Kyle Yeomans. He's a really good friend of mine that goes way back. Whenever Rob Phillips left DallasCowboys.com a couple of years back, he put in my name. He's like, hey, why don't you interview this guy and see what he's got? They brought me in, and I guess the rest is history.
Man.
First year at DallasCowboys.com was incredible. Had the opportunity to work on some awesome projects. Also, just work on the beat has been really humbling. It's been a great job so far. I love the team that we have over there too. I feel like we're coming up with new stuff every day. We're doing great stuff every day. Not to toot my own horn here, but I feel like we're doing a really good job over there, and really excited about the future over there too.
You say toot horns? You ain't got to worry about tooting your horn. We'll toot it for you, big brother. Let's kick off the show. We got Nick Harris in the building.
The man, the myth, the legend. Nick Harris.
On with it.
I'm back outside. Yeah, I just wanna run it up. Can we check or something? I've been really in the field, let up. Yeah, I've been really in the field, let her rush, I let her feel. Lately, I just wanna run it up. Don't need no deals, I make the deal. Have to take it to a meal. Lately, I just wanna run it up. Yeah. Kinda check a song. Lately, I just wanna run it up. Count that too, count it up. Yeah. Count it up. Lately, I just wanna run it up. Need them ones, I need them fives. Need them tens, I need that change. To the safe, got blues inside. Greens and pinks, it's all the same. I still save and roll my change. Take some losses when I play, charge it to the game. I'm with L, yeah, I'm with T Black, I'm with Reverend now. I'm with Bay, yeah, I'm with Jay, yeah, I'm with Chuck and now. Still the same, not switching sides, now it's about loyalty. You switch sides off for the bag, and that's worth more to me. I mix Nike with designer, I experiment. You just rock what's on the shelf, and I'm not feeling it. Search for the one, but baby girl, it's nothing real as this. Can't trust a soul, I keep a hammer, call it too legit. I've been really in the field, let her rush, I let her feel. Lately, I just wanna run it up.
Oh man, never gets old, never gets old, never gets old.
Never.
All right, we got the OC in the building, man. OC, we gonna be Curtis, man. We gonna kick it off with you, brother.
Man, well, first of all, I had to get on this show, man. We got Nick Harris, the man who is doing such a fantastic job in Dallas Cowboys content. And I just respect him as a scout because he has a scouting mind. So I'm always interested to hear his perspectives and his viewpoints about the current roster, what's going to take place next, and just kind of his view on the world of Dallas Cowboys. So, man, super excited to have you on the show, my friend. And, man, it's great to see you.
Man, I appreciate it. It's good to be back here. I'm excited to dive into some ball.
All right. So I kicked at you to talk some ball, CC. So you didn't talk no ball. I'm gonna talk some ball. So it's an article came out from Dallas.com. It's a little bit older, but it's something we've been talking over here a lot. Is DT still the most pressing need? So you had basically an article where you spoke and you said absolutely. As of now, there is not a one tech on the roster that has proven that he can produce at the NFL level to replace what Jonathan Hankins. I just want you to elaborate on that, and we will kind of just go around the wheel.
Yeah, so let's look at the roster, right, and look at what's in place in front of them at one tech to potentially fill in that role. You look at Mazy Smith coming off the rookie season that I don't think anybody would have hoped for him, including himself even. It depends on who you talk to as far as maybe weight loss goes or as far as injuries go. You know, he has this offseason shoulder surgery that apparently he was dealing with towards the back half of the season last year. How much of that factors in? But regardless of all of the ifs, ands, or buts, you have to look at the production that happened on the field, and that production just wasn't there. Whenever Jonathan Hankins was taken out of the equation there, it was the beginning of December when he didn't play it through that 3-4 game stretch. You look at that Buffalo game, you look at that Detroit game, you look at that Miami game, and just being overpowered physically in the trenches, and you can attribute it almost directly to that interior defensive line. Osa Odighizuwa brings you an interesting presence there at 3-tech. He's an athletic guy that can get off the ball pretty quick. He can actually have, a little bit of pass rushing next. But when you have a 1-tech that cannot stop the run to overcome maybe where Osa Odighizuwa lacks, then you have a real liability there in the interior defensive line. And I think that's something that we saw last year whenever Jonathan Hankins came out of the equation. Mazy Smith wasn't really able to fill into that role or be comfortable in that role at least. And then you look at the other two guys that they brought in this year, the two rookies. You look at Justin Rogers, the 7th-round pick out of Auburn. And then you look at Denzel Jackson, undrafted free agent out of Illinois, who I considered a draft-worthy prospect whenever he was coming out. So I feel like it was a good part on the Cowboys end, Will McClay and those personnel guys, to be able to bring him in the undrafted class. But you look at those three guys, and then you also have Carl Davis, who's been in the league for about 9-10 years now, but hasn't really found an opportunity to get on the field consistently since about 2017. So he's been used to being this reserve role, and he even had an opportunity last year when Hankins went down, and he did not produce at any sort of level, so much so that he was even taken out and replaced by Mazy in the middle of the game. So where is the comfort at 1-tech? I think that's one of the more pressing questions that I would have going into Oxnard is there a plan here? And I think you look at available free agents that are still out there. You have Linval Joseph, who has a ton of experience with Mike Zimmer with the Minnesota Vikings. He's still out there. Yes, he's a little bit older, so how comfortable are you there? And then also Brian Monet. He was a draft pick of the Seahawks about 4 years ago. He battled injury towards the back half of his rookie contract. Still out there as a free agent, 335-pound type body, but those are the only two names that really jump out to me in the free agent market. So where do you go from there? And can one of these rookies potentially step in and be that starting caliber 1-tech? That's one of the bigger questions for me going into Oxnard period. Yes, I understand the running back position. Yes, I maybe understand the depth of the cornerback position. There might even be some other things you could look at along the defensive line even. But I look at that 1-tech position, and then I think that's where there's probably the most concern for me.
Yes, indeed. Nothing more demoralizing than on a team if you can't stop the run. And you lamented a great point with the reservations that you may have. We got a lot of knives but no hammers on the defensive side. You want a defensive tackle to gobble up and do some things on stopping the run, and we just don't have that for right now. And the two names that you mentioned, Linval Joseph, that's a long tooth, and like you said with the other guy, he's still out there, but he's battled through some injuries. I would want the Cowboys to wait, unfortunately, to see who get cut from the Browns or the Jets and try to play around with those guys. Or if you want to be ultra aggressive with this, you go out there, you make a trade acquisition, because there are known commodities, then there are the unknown commodities, right? And when you bet on your draft picks and you miss 3 to 4 years. How often we can say this about, we miss Big Bo now, right? Bohanna, He was a guy that we drafted and we wanted to develop him. He was here, and then we ended up losing him. The other guy, I forgot his name, I think John Ridgeway. He was a guy that we drafted, we wanted to develop, and we lose him, right? So those are 3 to 4 years that you can't get back. So the Cowboys, if they're really all in with Rodgers or Denzel Jackson, that's another 2 to 3 years that you can lose. Why not the Cowboys, Jerry Jones, if you're listening, and Stephen Jones, go ahead and spend the money and get a known commodity where you can know you can plug and play, and we can get things on the way.
Yeah, I feel you there.
Yeah.
I think you look at the defense overall, right?
Right.
The concerns that you maybe had in the second level last year, you've added bodies, you've added experience. You get Trayvon Diggs back in the secondary. The safety group, I feel like, is just going to be a well-oiled machine at all times, just considering how long those guys have played together. So if you can find a guy that can fill in and be that known commodity, like you said, then I think you have a defense that's worthy of being a top 10 defense next year.
I had a quick question for you, Nick. And it's a 3-part question. And first of all, I agree with Linville Joseph. I think that would be a great pickup for the Dallas Cowboys. I think he's still a guy, even at his age, he has a lot of experience, that maybe you get 25 to 30 quality snaps out of him, in my opinion. But I wanted to go back and ask you a little bit more in depth about Mazy Smith and just kind of the scenario there. In my experience and just being around the game, I've never seen a large interior lineman lose 40 pounds, regain it back, have strength, have success playing on the inside. And I don't know, maybe you do, maybe you could speak to this. And if he's not going to be the ideal one tech, okay, based upon his skill set, do you see another area along that line that maybe he could play effectively?
You know, Mike, that's an interesting question, because Mike Zimmer has talked about a little bit as far as, you know, he saw some things off of Mazy Smith last year that maybe offered some optimism towards him playing 3-tech. But, you know, how does that factor in with Osa Odigizua? Is that a situation where maybe Osa goes down with injury and they try to slide Mazy over if they have a 1-tech that's already ready to fill the spot he would leave? But I think there might be some playing around you could do with the interior defensive line with him. The thing with Mazy, and this is the only little bit of optimism that I still have towards his development left, is what he did in his final year at Michigan. What was he asked to do, and how was he able to produce in those roles? So he was able to move up and down that interior of the defensive line. I wouldn't say the entire defensive line, but you saw him line up anywhere from 1, 3, even out to 5-tech a little bit at times, and he was able to get to the passer. So he has a little bit of pass rush knacks that I think could still be taken advantage of if the 1-tech position doesn't end up working for him. But I think first things first, he's going to have to get healthy. He's going to have to add that weight back in a healthy manner, because there's bad weight, there's good weight, and I think he adds it back in a healthy manner. Then we worry about where he can slide in on the field from there.
Yeah, and I second that point, just to banter with you, Nick, that I saw Mazy be the most effective, in my opinion, the most dominant one-on-one with guards in Michigan. You know, and he made some great plays interior-wise, but I thought he was really the most, like, flashy, in my opinion. Like, he had some success being able to win one-on-one, but then the question again would be, is he going to take any of Odighizua's reps? And, you know, I doubt, but we'll see how it plays out. So that's interesting.
Well, I want to get to something that you forwarded on Twitter. All right. And Brandon, he does a great job. He really does a great job. He's somebody I want to reach out to. He said, he does great, man. He's a machine gun when it comes down to this content stuff. He does great. Brandon said, history can sometimes repeat itself. In 2005, the Cowboys took a chance in the 7th round on the DT from Auburn, Jay Ratliff. In 2024, the Cowboys took a chance in the 7th round on the DT from Auburn, Justin Rogers. Nick, are you buying or selling this theory?
I think when I retweeted that, I just thought it was a cool note. As far as buy or sell, let me think about this, because I want to be honest with you here.
Please be honest.
I'll buy a little bit. I'll buy a little bit
Oh.
because I thought I had Justin Rogers as a fifth round grade in my draft stack whenever things were going through. I really liked what he did at Kentucky before he transferred to Auburn. At Auburn, he was asked to do a little bit different things, but you still look at the production that he had. He had 3 or more stops in the run game in 7 games last year for Auburn, and they're playing an SEC schedule against some of the best teams in the SEC as well. So he was still producing at what he was being asked to do. But you go back to Kentucky where he was on the field for 75, 80% of snaps, even on passing downs, and he was getting to the passer and generating pressure and breaking that depth of the pocket. I think he's a guy that I think they could toy with a little bit. And I see a little bit of what Mike Zimmer has developed in interior defensive linemen in what Justin Rogers could potentially produce, but I see it more in the Kentucky tape than I saw it in the Auburn tape. Now, how much of that is factored in just towards being comfortable in a new system and only having 1 year in that system? That's where the intangibles and different dynamics kind of come into play that you'll just never know. But I think he does have a good shot whenever you get to Oxnard and you put the pads on and see what he can actually produce there on the interior of that defensive line.
Intriguing indeed, because we'll be looking at Tyler Smith with him. We will be looking at Zach Martin against him. We will be looking at Cooper Beebe. So that's a good way to whoop him into shape. Yeah. Now, Ratliff was different, though. Ratliff was a whole lot smaller, quicker, and able to get upfield and do crazy things at that size. So 2 different situations, but the same school, maybe, hopefully, with Mike Zim, the things that we're looking for will be beneficial to what we need to do. And I can't wait to see it, because I think that real coaching far as the D-line situation with Paul Gunter, as well as Coach Z and Greg Ellis, I think that we are in better shape from a coaching wise versus what we had last season as well.
Well, I want to throw something out here, Nick. I want to get your thoughts on this too.
Throw it at me.
I was concerned about DT, but I think it's gonna work itself out regardless. I think it's gonna work itself out. I believe Steven is trying to see what his guys can do, which is his usual MO, right? And if it don't work out, they go out there and do something about it. I believe in our scout team enough that they can come get us a DT. They might have to trade like they did with Jonathan Hankins, but I think they can do it because they've been saying a lot about getting a DT. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think whenever you go back to what Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones both said in Mobile at the Senior Bowl at the start of the offseason, they said their 2 big objectives were to get better running the ball and to get better stopping the run. I can't say with confidence that they've done either of those things yet. Now we haven't gotten to the field yet. We could talk about running the ball, I'm sure, later on, but let's look at stopping the run. I mean, I could see them making the argument for Eric Kendricks coming in, having that experience, and that safety group. I think there's a lot of intriguing young guys in that group too. But does that mean we're just allowing the run game to get to the second level? It's like, yes, it is better if it's getting stopped at the second level, but why not address it at the first level? So I understand where you're coming from, and I would have to assume as well, if we're talking about this defensive tackle position right now on this picture right now, if we're talking the same points and the same dialogue 3-4 weeks from now, then yeah, they have to go make a move, and Stephen Jones has shown that he could do that before. And they talked about it in the very final draft press conference on day 3. It was towards the end of the press conference. Jerry Jones was high on delirium, and he was kind of letting some things loose. And he was like, hey, man, don't be surprised if we get on the phones and start calling some people. Because we have some pieces that, maybe work better for different defenses, and we need pieces that work better for our defense. He said that. So, I mean, that he's put it out there. He's let the world know that, and he's let the league know that his phone is on. So we'll see if that phone ends up ringing.
In that specific comment, it sounded like he was referring to the Washington Commanders.
Yeah, which is interesting.
Yeah.
I remember that exact comment but you also just hinted towards running back. What's your thoughts on running back?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I think Ezekiel Elliott is the incumbent RB1. I think as soon as you arrive in Oxnard, I think he's the guy that they're going to rely upon, both because of his experience, his ability just to do multiple things. Yes, he's not producing nearly at the level that he was even 2-3 years ago, or even when he was back in Dallas a couple of years back. But you saw what he did in the receiving game last year. He had 50-plus receptions. I believe it was in the neighborhood of 500, 600 receiving yards. So I think you still have that comfort that you can rely on in the receiving game to put him on the field in passing downs, either as a pass-catching threat or as a pass protector. He's still great in that pass protecting realm, but he's not going to be the guy that can average you 5-6 yards to carry anymore. He's just not that. So anything over 4, you're playing with house money at that point. So you have to have a guy behind Ezekiel Elliott that can be that big time playmaker, that can be that lightning in a bottle. I like what Rico Dowdle does when he's healthy, but he hasn't been 100% healthy other than the first 6 games of the season last year. It feels like he hasn't been 100% healthy his entire career. You look at Deuce Vaughn, the coaching staff is being very intentional and purposeful and trying to figure out what they can do to get him on the field and get the ball in his hands. They lined him up at receiver during OTAs and minicamp, trying to play with some different things with him. But then you just kind of look at a bunch of names after that. You got Nathaniel Pete, an undrafted free agent out of Missouri who backed up a walk-on at Missouri. You have Snoop Connor, who hasn't really found his footing in the league, even though he was drafted, I believe, in the 5th round by the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then you have Royce Freeman, who's just, another residential veteran that you have in that room to hopefully elevate the competition a little bit and give a little bit more experience. But on the same token, he kind of feels like the Ronald Jones signing of last year. And, how far did he make it past training camp to that same point? So I don't know. It's a room that has very little to show for it at this point, at least from what you can pull from the last couple of years. And if this offense feels like they are better running the ball with this running back room than they were last year, then I think they would be pulling themselves.
Oh, whoa.
Let me ask you this, though. How far did Malik Davis fell off since 2022?
Good question.
Because he was a guy that a lot of people were talking about the ability to jump in and catch out of the backfield, run in between the splits. But last season, it seems as if, though, he kind of walked under a ladder or something. What happened to Malik Davis? What's going on? What's the story with him?
I have a little bit of confidence with Malik Davis still. I think he suffered last year, being put on the practice squad last year. I think this is just my personal opinion, I think he suffered by being a duplicate type back as to what they already had. He's the type that he's a smaller scat back that can kind of get you out in space. They want to get him outside zone. He's not going to be a between the tackles guy. They'll get him active in the receiving game. But then you look at the running backs that they had on roster last year, and they had Tony Pollard, who's a very similar type of back, a Deuce Vaughn, who's a very similar type of back. Again, I'm trying to put you back in the mind of them creating this roster going into 2023. And so, what is going to be the objective of bringing in a Malik Davis onto the roster when you already are using 2 roster spots at running back for a very similar type of product? So I think going into this year, he maybe has a little bit more of an advantage just by roster dynamics. I was able to talk to him not too long ago during the media days whenever they came in to get their Sunday Night Football stuff shot and everything. And he's very excited to hit the field this year. He says he feels like he's kind of added an extra bit of athleticism to his game even. He feels fresh because he hasn't played in a whole year. I think he could be that guy maybe in preseason that takes that extra step and is able to be that playmaker, but can he be RB2 quality? I think that's asking a lot. But I think that's asking a lot of anybody behind Ezekiel Elliott in that room. That's just my personal opinion.
No doubt.
Yeah, going back to Ezekiel Elliott, I'm curious to get your over and under if he's a 1,000-yard rusher this season or not. And absolutely not. Okay, cool. I agree with that. And then number 2,
why?
Who's out
I want to know why.
Okay,
because I think he can. I think he can get a K.
Who's out there, Nick, in your opinion, that the Cowboys possibly could add to this roster to shore it up in terms of an RB2 or RB1B? Let me put it that way.
Yeah, I would have to look at the free agent list again. I have to admit it's been a couple weeks since I've had that refresher. But to the 1,000-yard point mark, why it would probably be under that mark, he would have to carry the ball, north of 250 times, maybe 300 times to even get to the number. I just don't see them relying on him that much. And again, I don't think he's that 4 yards per carry back that he was. I think getting him to 3.7, that's your goal. And if you can hope to get him to that number, then you're at least moving the sticks and you're at least playing ahead of the chains a little bit. But I think even to that sense, I mean, you look at what he hasn't been able to do as far as getting out in the open field and making big plays over the course of the last couple of years. I don't understand why you would be asking him to do that again this year. But I think he falls somewhere in the 700-yard range. I think he comes comfortably under that stretch.
What about touchdowns?
That's interesting because how many times is he going to be handed the ball inside the 5? I mean, God knows he didn't have that inside the 5-yard runner last year.
Because that's what's important.
Exactly, and I that's the reason he's back, right? I mean,
Right.
you look at things,
Right.
you look at pass protection, you look at leadership, you can factor all those things in. But his short yardage ability, I think if it wasn't for that, he would still be out on the street. So I think bringing him in to have that type of mentality in the short yardage situations, he could reach double-digit touchdowns. But again, it just depends on how often he's called upon, and that's going to be an interesting layer to this offense.
I
Let
think
me
he
ask
gonna
you
get
this.
close to 1,000. I'm gonna tell you why I think he gonna get close to 1,000. I think he gonna have to touch the ball over 250, which is right at Pollard. And Pollard got real close. The reason why I think he gonna have to touch and get about 250 touches, Rico.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what you said. He has never, ever, ever finished the season since South Carolina, ever. So I think that if he stays healthy, you're right. I think, if Rico stay, Zeke is not gonna get 1,000. But I think based on the talent and the lack thereof, I think they go call upon him. Oh, so you think I'm tripping on that? Your face kind of
I think my opinion is this. I think Zeke falls somewhere between 800 and 1,000 yards this season. That's what I think. I think you're going to have injury histories. I think you're going to have a lack of productivity from the backs they currently have. I think Zeke does reach double-digit touchdowns, at least 10.
Yeah.
And I think that Zeke probably carries the ball 220 to 230 times this year. That's my prediction. That's how I see it based on what's on the roster right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I respect that, and I respect that completely. And it wouldn't surprise me if that's probably the end equation, but just finding confidence in him being the consistent RB1 without an RB2 to be able to kind of carry or pick up the load behind him.
That's gonna be tough.
struggle to see how that's going to work.
I saw a weird.
I think to your point too, not to cut anyone off, that Zeke probably starts off strong. He fades middle-ish part of the season because his body gets tired.
Yep.
And then you just hope that he recovers and picks it up when you get in the playoffs. I mean, that's what I think. I think he starts pretty strong though.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna need to lean on Royce this year.
Royce Freeman.
I have a feeling
you
we're
guys
gonna need to
leaving
lean on him a little bit.
Royce Freeman, he could be a guy that can make some noise. He averaged 3.9 yards per total last season, so he could be a guy that can be a downhill guy, right? And on top of that, let's not forget about Hunter. He can get some of those snaps. And there's a weird stat out there that I believe I saw the other day on Twitter that Zeke had more receiving yards than Jahmyr Gibbs, something like that. Last season.
That's kind of
so he
frustrating.
can be used in the back
Because New England did a better job of using Zeke and his catching ability than he's ever been used in Dallas. What's your thoughts on that, Nick?
I will say it's probably there's a couple of factors towards I think that being the case. You look at their quarterback situation last year, their offensive line situation last year, and then having to dumping it off to him so many times.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, it also speaks to his ability to still produce in the receiving game.
Yeah.
He's still routes. He's still running angle routes at the age that he's at. I say age, he's in his late 20s, but in running back terms, that may as well be dinosaur age. But I think with what New England was able to do last year, there's still some things that they can include in this offense this year that maybe Ezekiel Elliott hasn't been asked to do in a Dallas Cowboys uniform before.
I'm going to turn the corner real quick because we talked to everybody about this particular subject. And you tweeted this. You said the fifth-year option deadline for Trey Lance is officially passed. It is never the plan to pay $22.4 million in 2025 for a depth QB. So where does the value come in this trade? Great question. That still remains to be seen, if at all. We'll check back at the end of preseason. So since obviously you was in the mini camps and you was obviously at the OTAs, what would you say as of now that trade discussion is going? Because we know it's not over with. We got to see him in preseason. We got to see him under the lights and under the pressure. So we not putting all, we not saying be great now. But what's your thoughts on him now?
Yeah, it's fascinating, and I've answered this question maybe 3 or 4 times over the course of the last couple of months. And I have to give my consistent answer with, for me, when I'm evaluating quarterback play, I have to see it happen on the field. And we haven't seen that happen on the field over the course of the last year. But let's go back and kind of look at his context a little bit, right?
Yeah.
You look at this 2020 season at North Dakota State, which was supposed to be his year where he stamped his mark and was able to stamp his mark as a top 5 pick in the draft. And yes, he was able to do that, but he only played one game that year because of the COVID rules and everything. And then you go into a San Francisco situation. He only started 4 games. And one of them, he was out of that game pretty early on with injury. And another game, it was an absolute monsoon, and he wasn't able to do anything really in that game. And then in the other 2 games, it was out of hand very early on. So is that an excuse for Trey Lance? Absolutely not, because he's had opportunities in the preseason. He had multiple opportunities to prove himself in San Francisco, and that didn't pan out. Instead, they went with a Mr. Irrelevant. And there are politics involved whenever you look at draft picks and how much value you put into a draft pick. So for San Francisco to look at their number 3 overall pick, trade him for a 4th, and bank on the future of that Mr. Irrelevant being the franchise quarterback, that says a lot to what they saw in San Francisco. Now, jump to his time in Dallas. What has he done over the course of the last year to maybe give that optimism that Mike McCarthy and even Dak Prescott speak about? Well, he came in after training camp last year, didn't play a snap, we have not seen him on the field at all. All we've seen him do is line up in that 15 jersey on the sideline. And then before every single game, he was able to travel last year because of the new quarterback 3 rule. And he was able to work with quarterbacks coach Scott Tolzien in a one-on-one structured workout. And they worked for 2-3 hours before the game every single week, which is a wild amount of time that they were able to dedicate just to Trey Lance. And how much of that is going to translate into Oxnard? Ask me here in about 2-3 weeks whenever we really get that first opportunity to see him push it downfield. It's the short to mid-range accuracy that I'm going to be keeping an eye on. Has that improved? Has his comfort in the pocket improved? I think whenever he had pressure in his face in San Francisco with NFL pass rushers coming at him, there was no comfort in his stance at all. There was no comfort in his throwing motion. So can he just be comfortable in his own pocket? I think that's all they should be asking of him going into the preseason. And if he's able to do that, then we'll be able to see what that athletic arm he has, that athletic talent that he has back on the field. And he might be able to push Cooper Rush for this backup quarterback job. I mean, they've mentioned it many times. Stephen Jones said this is a battle going into training camp. Now, right. How long will we be talking about this battle? I think that'll speak a lot towards Trey Lance's progression.
Well, I was going to say this, though. How many years Trey Lance been in the National Football League panel?
Can I answer this one?
This 5?
Yeah.
Going 5th?
Yeah, this would be for year 4.
Yeah.
You go for your 4. So the reason why I threw that at that is because there are about 3 or 4 quarterbacks that was drafted this season older than him. So he got plenty of ways to continue to grow and develop or what have you. It's just a contract situation. He's rather a real young guy. So I'm not trying to say to use that as an excuse, but I think the Cowboys took a shot in the dark to see whether or not they can get this guy based off of potentials, not based off of what talent that he exhibit. So he do have youth on his side because, like I said, there are 3 or 4 quarterbacks that was drafted this season older than him.
Well, I think anybody that's for the Cowboys want Trey Lance to actually Super Bowl out in preseason.
Facts, yeah.
You know, because
the trade value, yeah.
The trade value, 1, absolutely. Yeah. But 2, I think that's going to also make you have a better QB 1. I think nobody responds to QB controversy better than that, to me. Like, what he did with Romo, sniffing down his neck, is not known. Like, most quarterbacks crumble under quarterback controversies and competitions. It makes him rise. Because I'm pretty sure it pissed him off a little bit when they traded for him. But what ended up happening? MVP-ish season, right? What's your thoughts on that, Nick?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I don't think necessarily that there's any pressure really in Dak's mind. This is just me theorizing, and we haven't talked on this topic about it. I think the pressure should be falling upon Cooper Rush's mind, obviously, which is tough for him because he's been productive when he's been called upon. I mean, yes, he's not throwing for 300 yards per game whenever he's being asked to start, but he's 4-1 as a starter. And when Dak has gone down, he's proven that he can come up to the task and at least manage that offense to a winning capability. And that's tough for him to have this young gun, like you said. Youth is on his side, coming in with all this athletic prowess he's going to be able to do a lot of things that neither Dak Prescott nor Cooper Rush can do from an athletic standpoint. I mean, we're talking a lot of open capabilities in the RPO game and the option game that we haven't really been able to see. We saw a little bit from Dak last year as they started to open up his athleticism a little bit, but Trey Lance is more athletic than both of those guys combined. So, I don't know if there's necessarily pressure with Dak, but you obviously look at Cooper, and the fact of the matter is there's pressure on all three of these guys. All three of them are heading into the final year of their contract. Nothing is promised beyond 2024. So whatever they do every time they step on the field, that's their I guess that's their job performance review.
Yeah. The only way I could see pressure is he just ball out of one of them preseason games. Because you know what's going to happen in Dallas, Nick. You know exactly what happened with Cooper Rush with 4-1. Do we need to replace that?
Yeah.
Only in Dallas.
I could definitely see that rhetoric picking up if we're in the regular season. Trey Lance has been ascended to the backup quarterback role. Dak has to miss a couple of games for whatever reason, and Trey Lance balls out. I could see maybe pressure setting in a little bit there, just because that's going to be the storyline of the week for the Cowboys. So, I could see that making sense, but like you said, I think Dak rises to that equation. I think Dak is miles beyond, obviously, where Trey Lance is right now.
So, real quick, another guy that's been coming up a lot, Kavante Turpin. Now, Mr. Turpin, I've been seeing it from a lot of y'all, a lot of people that was out there at the mini camps and OTAs and all that kind of stuff. They've been saying that Turpin is really looking like he ready to really compete for wide receiver 3. What are you seeing out there from Turpin?
Yeah, I don't think I would take that step, but I think he is going to be competing for a roster spot for sure. And by roster spot, I'm not only meaning as a kick returner. I mean as a receiver as well. You look at what he did from an offensive standpoint last year when he was called upon. I believe he was in the neighborhood of about 10 receptions for 125 yards and that touchdown against San Francisco. I think he had another touchdown at some point last year too. But he's that dynamic speed threat that if he just understands the offense and he has time to sit and grasp with it and soak in it, and he knows his job whenever he does hit the field, he can be a big-time weapon. I think that's going to be the biggest thing for him, is just understanding the offense completely. But going into year 2 of the system, I think that only benefits him. This is the first year that he's entered this is the first season that he's entered while he's been in the NFL, where he hasn't had to learn a new offensive system. So that will benefit him for sure. How productive can he be? I think that's going to be a big determining factor in preseason as well. Trey Lance, that might be his weapon of choice. Who knows?
Ooh.
Based on his speed, though, Nick, something interesting I saw last year. I want to get your take on this. The Cowboys used him laterally, horizontally in the offense and a little bit up the field. But I didn't see the Cowboys using him like as a deep threat with his speed, going down the field on long patterns. I think that would actually be a great benefit just here and there. Not all the time, but here and there. I think he could take the top off the defense and run past some slower defenders. What do you think?
That's a fascinating topic that I think maybe opens up I think it opens up a much bigger conversation about the offensive system in general. This is just my opinion, but who would you think is my opinion of the guy who stretched the field the most last year on a consistent basis? Other than CeeDee Lamb.
Stretched the
Brandon
field
Carr.
the most.
Cooks? Are you talking about Cooks?
I'm sorry, Cooks. I said Carr. I'm sorry. I meant Cooks. I apologize. Cooks.
Yeah, I would say Jake Ferguson. Because of what he was able to do as far as getting down on those seam routes. I mean, they became so comfortable, Dak and Jake Ferguson. And you look at the routes that Brandon Cooks was being asked to run last year, it was a lot of stuff along the middle of the field too. I mean, this is a West Coast system that Mike McCarthy brought to Dallas. And they've adopted it as the Texas Coast or whatever you want to call it. And the nature of that being is the fact that a lot of guys are just going to come across the middle of the field. It's going to allow Dak to have as much time as possible, allow these guys to be able to kind of interweave within each other. And we saw that so many times last year, both with CD and Brandon Cooks. And I think Jake Ferguson was asked more so than even Brandon Cooks at times last year to stretch the field and get down the seam so Dak can hit him. And they became so comfortable throwing that ball and connecting on that pass that it looked like it had been rehearsed so many times. Even the first time we saw it, it was in the Jets game, was the first time that we actually saw that. And it just kept coming. Game after game, week after week, we see that seam connection between Dak Prescott and Jake Ferguson. But I want to get back to your point on Kavante Turpin. I think that's just a product of being in that offensive system and having the speed that he does. Get him out in open field, yes, but also have him under 20 yards. So if he catches the ball, he can use that yard after catch ability too. Now, is there an ability to get him down the field and produce as a vertical threat? Absolutely, but that's going to have to be them finding a way to implement that in the offense, and Kavante Turpin being able to accommodate that as well.
Yeah.
Those,
Great point, Nick. Yeah, great point. I mean, I'm my only thought is, man, who can cover what nickel corner could really cover him in the slot? Like that might be very difficult for someone. Like what maybe it's one or two safeties in the league that has the foot speed to run with him if you send him vertically up the seam. It's just so much. But anyway, that's just me just thinking through it. But you bring up great points though.
Now, physical nickels, I think they could get after him. It's guys that can just jam him off the line. That's where he struggles. But I think if he's able to beat a guy off his release, you're absolutely right. I don't think there's a nickel that can keep up with him from a speed perspective.
our one and only touchdown against the 49ers, they had Turpin inside, and then they motioned him to the opposite side on field side, and he was able to just burn the guy. And I was sitting there thinking, like, we knew that we were able to do that, and we didn't go back to it. Like, I want Mike McCarthy to stay consistent with those things that's working. On the end around, I think he averaged around about 7 to 8 yards per end around. I think that you can utilize Kavante Turpin a little bit more. Trust him. I know he's tiny, but you got to utilize him a little bit more. I've said this due to the passing of Jacoby Jones. May he rest in peace. But he was a guy that was like a guy that can give you that vertical. I take the top off the defense. I can be that release valve for the other guys. I think that if the Cowboys just focus in on utilizing Kavante Turpin just a little bit more, don't worry about his size, and I think that he can be that X factor for us, and especially since they changed the kickoff rule. Hopefully we'll be able to see more and more of those type of things from him.
And you raised a good point with Ferg. I wasn't even thinking about that, but that opened up another question for me, because I think it was Mike McCarthy said that they took out some of the playbook when John Stevens went down. So
I don't remember that specifically, but it wouldn't surprise me.
I can't remember. It was somebody said it. I cannot remember. I think it was Mike McCarthy, or it might have been Coach Wells. Somebody said it. But anyway, I wanted to get your thoughts on John Stevens and Brevin Spann, in addition to what they currently have with Ferguson and their ability to stretch. Because I believe, just, in my research of these guys, especially Spann, that they are actually more of Mike McCarthy's types than even Ferguson.
Yeah, they're two different types of tight ends, and John Stevens Jones and Brevin Spann Ford. You can look at both of them. John Stevens Jr. in college, he was a receiver. He was an outside threat that was being used at Louisiana Lafayette. It's kind of a position guy that they would use just on downfield routes. And he didn't start playing tight end and getting comfortable in line until he got to training camp and was working with the tight ends in Luna Wells. And he turned that into having an awesome preseason through 1.5 games before tearing that ACL. But he was well on his way towards making the 53-man roster. We've had it confirmed many times since then that he would have been on that 53-man. Who he would have replaced, I think that's the big question. But he's a receiving type of tight end that just has kind of that bigger frame that's being able to use and that you can use in those red zone situations. Whereas Brevin Spann Ford, he's the guy that didn't have a ton of receiving production at college, but he was being asked to do a lot of things at the point of attack in the run game at Minnesota to be able to help a left tackle or help a right tackle and being able to, assimilate some outside zone type stuff. So I think he's going to be more so used in the running game, whereas John Stevens Jones will be more so used in the receiving game. But is there a spot for both of them on the roster? That's where you have to ask. Now, Sean McEwen's no longer in the equation. And then you also have Peyton Hendershot, who needs to take that next step to prove that he can be better than one or both of those guys. You look at him, he's the receiving type of tight end, so you would have to think that it's him versus John Stevens Jr. potentially for that last spot.
Yeah, Yeah, because tight end is going to be very interesting to me. to me, that's one of the top battles that I'm interested in. I think that's gonna be very, because I'm afraid that second round politics might kind of try to play a factor. Because I heard John Machota, who's gonna be visiting us on Thursday, say last year. He said basically, if we would have been highlighting John Stevens last year through all the practices and the preseason, they said he would have been the pick of the draft based on his performance in training camp. Would you echo something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when he was being called upon in Oxnard, he was producing. He was downfield, short to medium routes, because he has that route running background as a receiver at Lafayette, and he just kind of fit into that tight end role almost seamlessly. And I think he also benefits by having a young room around him too. It's a lot of young guys, so they're able to kind of just mesh and gel with each other a little bit better. So. And Jake Ferguson's done a really good job, too, of help ushering those guys along. I think they all work really well together, and John Stevens Jr. was kind of a product of that by a certain point.
So, like...
I have a quick...
Go ahead, OC.
No, just a really quick question. In your opinion, is John Stevenson Jr., is he better than Shoemaker? I mispronounce his name all the time. I apologize. Do you think he's better? Do you think he's a better tight end?
That one's tough. Is he a better receiving threat? Yes. Is he a better blocking guy? No. So it depends on what you're looking for there behind Jake Ferguson. And I think if you want a guy that can stretch the field a little bit more and be that receiving weapon opposite of Jake Ferguson, maybe in some 12 personnel type sets, then John Stevens Jr. is your guy. But if you want a guy that in 12 personnel type sets, you want to have more beef up front and help those rookies up front on the offensive line have a little bit more stability, then maybe you have a guy like Luke Schoonmaker. He's another guy that just hasn't been healthy. And I think when he does get healthy, if that happens during this training camp, then he's going to have his opportunity to shine. But you remember last year, he didn't touch the field at training camp, I believe, until the week 2 of the preseason. So he's going to have to get to Oxnard and be healthy from the jump so that he can start his development and not have it stunted at any point.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What's your prediction about him going into this year? Do you think this is a breakout year for him, or do you think that he'll be outplayed by lower draft picks? Because we've heard Stephen Jones and I believe even others say that, hey, if we draft him, we gotta play him.
Yeah, that was Will McClay said that.
Yeah. So do you think it's going to be a forced situation, like he's going to play regardless of what, or kind of what's your feedback?
Hey, I think he's going to play, and we're talking about Schoonmaker here, right?
Schoonmaker, yep.
Yeah, he's going to play. They're going to give him a full opportunity to show what he can show. Now, when does the rug maybe get pulled out from under him if performance is not showing up? I don't know. I don't maybe have the answer to that question. But and as far as where he can produce and how much he can produce this year, I maybe don't have the answer to that question either. But I think he's definitely going to get his opportunity. And whether that's a healthy opportunity or an unhealthy opportunity, that's going to ultimately be up to his body.
No doubt.
Got it. And then, guys, I'm going to let y'all land this plane. Nick, it was great to talk to you. I got to jump off for another meeting. But, man, I appreciate the time I have with you guys today.
Appreciate it, man.
Appreciate you, OC.
You had something. You sound like you was kind of.
I was just going to say that, one of the deciding factors of the tight end will be who can play the 6 offensive linemen, because we going to have Tyler Guyton out there. We're going to have a tight end that can chip and release and not just necessarily be able to run routes. So I think that's where Schoonmaker is going to get his name at. Like you said, a beefier tight end. Brevin Spanford could be another guy. So that's the competition that I'm looking for. And also, not to just circle all the way back, but that's what makes Ezekiel Elliott valuable too. Being able to help out this rookie offensive lineman that's going to be on the blind side of Dak Prescott and possibly help out Cooper Beebe if he get the started role. We're going to have somebody that can block. So blocking will be a very, very crucial thing for this particular season.
Yeah, absolutely, Law. Absolutely. And to me, we seem like we are actually built to run the ball. When I really look at how we're currently assembled and how we drafted, we look like we have really built a team that can be physical on the ground if we choose to. I want to run one more thing by you that I've been thinking about. You've been doing one of the best jobs of keeping your eyes on DeMarvion over Sean. You've been really, really keeping up with this. I can tell you got close eyes. So I want to run something by you. So Pollard, he was not the same after that clean ankle break. Still was not the same after his ACL was broken in 3 places.
Can I argue that point really quick? I think towards the back half of the season last year,
I would agree. I would agree.
Post Thanksgiving, I thought Terrence Steele played his best football, but I understand.
Good fight. I take that punch. I take that punch right on the chin.
I understand your point.
That's fine. All right, I'll take that punch, and I think that's fair. All right. Gallup was not the same.
Yeah.
But this is the difference. Overshawn, August. Diggs, August. John Stevens, August. Now, we got to trust you, Nick, because your eyes are in the building. What are you seeing from those guys that I just named? And what's your thoughts on them actually having a better year outside of their injury other than the other guys who came on late?
I'll run down that list really quick and just kind of what I've heard about those 3 guys. So we can start with Overshawn, since that's the point. Okay. He's grown both mentally on the off the field, and he's been in the weight room working just about everything other than his left ACL throughout the past 12 months.
Right.
And you can tell that he's added about 12 to 13 pounds of pure muscle. He's ready to play in that second level. I would be shocked if when we land in Oxnard next Tuesday, he's not ready to go. I think I'd be surprised if he starts camp on the PUP list. And I think if he does, it's purely out of precautionary reasons, because I think he's ready to go. I mean, I've seen him move around. I've seen him cut back and forth. I've heard, from the recovery and rehab staff about what he has been able to do in the last couple of months of rehab. I think he's going to be ready, and I think he's going to be able to kind of pick up where he left off last year. Coming down to John Stevens, that's going to be an interesting one, just because he was already going to have to kind of figure out his role in an offense. He's still going to have to do that. And this time, coming off of an ACL injury, yes, he might have a little bit of confidence resided in the fact that he started camp off so well last year. But now, in some ways, it doesn't matter anymore, because they have a guy in Brevin Spanfour that they, invested undrafted free agent money in. They've guaranteed him at least a practice squad spot. So he's going to be in the building regardless, whether he's on the 53-man or on the practice squad. He's always going to be breathing down the neck of that tight end room. So he's going to have to prove himself again. And it's tough, and that's the nature of the situation for John Stevens. Now, how ready will he be? That's when we get out there and maybe we see. I think maybe he could start camp on PUP, but I think he's ready by the time preseason rolls around. And then Trayvon Diggs, and he happened week 3 of the season last year. I think he will start camp on PUP. That's just my initial reaction. He's a little bit behind where Overshawn is, and that's just the nature of their injuries happening, 4 or 5 weeks apart from each other. But I think by the time the season starts, Diggs should be ready to go.
Man, that's great insight. Nick, you talked about the size of Overshawn and his development, and he got a little bit bigger. There was news out there about Stevens getting a little bit bigger. Have you seen him around there? Because I think I heard Lunda Wells talking about that this guy's gotten a little bit bigger.
I think I heard Nick say it.
Oh, was that you?
He's swole. He is swole. He's for sure added some weight, and he's added weight to that upper half. Like, his shoulders are broader. He's added more muscle up top, and I think that's probably where he's going to have to be able to find his additional muscle mass, as in his upper body, and that's going to be required of him a little bit more at the tight end position than it will be, obviously, at what he was used to at the receiver position in college. So I think that's just a natural line of progression that he got used to whenever he got in the building last year before the ACL injury. And he was able to keep up that same workout regimen even after the ACL tear.
So he absolutely now looks like a tight end.
Yeah, for sure. I couldn't really give you an estimate as to maybe how much muscle or how much weight he's added, because I don't really remember exactly what his frame and figure looked like beforehand. But I can tell you, Overshawn, just looking at him beforehand and looking at him now, I'd guesstimate about 12, 13 pounds.
Most certainly.
So, obviously, we want to kind of get into your thoughts on potential camp battles. Like, what are some of the camp battles that you would say that you are probably the most excited to see?
Man, defensive tackle for sure. Just because I want to see if there's a cream that rises to the top there, or if there's not, what they do. The quarterback 2 battle, we've discussed it. But man, I don't think any battle will result in a better final result than the center position. I think those guys are going to push each other so hard, and I think it's going to create a really good center at the end of the day. Whether that's Brock Hoffman, Cooper Beebe, or even TJ Bass. I know TJ Bass is kind of being factored into the equation as well, but I'm really looking at this as a Cooper Beebe versus Brock Hoffman battle. And if y'all remember last year when I was on the show, I told y'all about Brock Hoffman. I said, hey, man, I think this is the guy.
You did.
Reliable interior offensive lineman that can help contribute to that depth of that offensive line. And again, not to toot my own horn here, but that's what he was able to do last year, right?
What'd you say about that?
If he's not the starting center coming out of training camp, that he's at least elevating Cooper Beebe to a level to where that center position is not a concern going into the year.
There you go. You got the horn.
Hey, we got the horn for you. You ain't got to toot your own horn. We got the horn.
So Nick, there's no nickel. There's no nickel battle at all. J. Lou got that spot, and there's no outside cornerback battle.
Receiver 3.
Yeah, none of that.
Receiver 3 is. I think there's going to be a battle there. I think it's Jalen Tolbert and Jalen Brooks. I think those are going to be the two guys, really, in my eyes, that are going to be competing for that spot. Jalen Brooks is taking another step, man. Like, don't discount what he could potentially bring. But I also think Jalen Tolbert is confident, and I think I've heard some concerns from the fan base and from content creators towards the receiver position behind CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks. Give it some time. Come back in a month. I really think that the youth in that room is going to be able to contribute. I mean, that room behind CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks, yes, there's not any proven guy there, but there's speed, there is ball catching ability, there's possession ability. I think those guys are going to be able to figure out a really good crop at the end of the day.
You got Crooms, Jalen Moreau Cropper. Is he going to be back in the house, right? You got those speedy guys. Yeah,
Jalen Cropper is an interesting one because special teams coordinator John Fossil has talked about the potential integration of 2 returners in the new kickoff rule. And Kavante Turpin obviously is going to be the cemented one. Deuce Vaughn is the assumed cemented 2. But if there ends up being a competition there, watch out for Jalen Cropper. Jalen Cropper is a guy that has a ton of return ability, and as well as Wanye Thomas. I think those 2 guys are going to be some guys that can push for that returner 2 spot too.
I gotta. We was almost finna get out of here, but I gotta throw you a curveball. I gotta use your scouting eye. What's going on with Bell?
Yeah, so he's going to move back to safety, and that's been determined. He was working with the safety group during OTAs and minicamp. I think the safety position is interesting because
it's interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's good interesting because you have Malik Hooker and Donovan Wilson who, when healthy, have shown that they can do their jobs and do it at an apt level. And then whenever they need to take some snaps off, whenever Wanye Thomas came in last year, he did a really solid job. And Marquise Bell, whenever he was asked to do safety stuff before Leighton Vander Esch went down, he was able to do some really great things too. So I think between Marquise Bell and Wanye Thomas, they have 2 guys that can immediately rotate in for either Donovan Wilson or Malik Hooker. I think Thomas is the Hooker rotation guy, and I think Bell is the Wilson rotation guy.
I got to bring up one more guy, just one more, because I was finna let you out, but it was one more. Because, see, when you bring up sleepers, I pay attention. Your eye is well to develop. So you wrote a lot about Mr. Johnson out of Nevada. Like, what's your gut feeling? And I know it's a deep safety room, but I get the feeling that you kind of got some pet cat kind of thing going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. Last year, my UDFA pet cats were TJ Bass and Hunter Luepke, and I felt really good about those. This year, I'm going with, other than Brevin Spanford, because I feel like that's a little bit of cheating to just call him a pet cat. But I'm looking at Amani Johnson, safety out of Nevada, and Julius Wood, safety out of East Carolina.
Ooh.
Both guys are big body type safeties. They played strong safety in college, and both of them played in a 2 to 3 safety look at most of the time. And they were able to be that rover guy that was able to kind of step up at the second level and provide run support. I mean, you look at it on that tweet, Amani Johnson had 100 tackles last season.
Yeah.
He finally had the opportunity to shine last year. And, man, when you see him coming across the middle and laying a hit on a ball carrier, it's not pretty. So I think you're going to see a couple of big hits out of him in the preseason, and it's going to make everybody turn their heads and be like, who the hell is this guy?
See,
I'm looking him up now, man.
See, Nick got – now, listen, y'all. Some people be faking out here. Nick, when it comes to this scouting, Say, listen, y'all. Listen, I got a button for him.
Quick Nick.
Say, let me hit this right quick. No, Nick don't play when it comes to scout. No.
You gotta pop out and show him.
Yeah, we know the draft guys, so I'm gonna keep an eye on every. See, because when you did call TJ Bass out early. See, I look for that too. I look for people who spot those sleepers. So I'm gonna be looking for that. All right, so this is absolutely my last question. Then I'm gonna give my final word, and then I'll give our final words. I got 2 questions for you to close out the final word. What's your gut feeling on Dak going into this year, and what's your gut feeling on the season based on what we've done so far in the offseason, Nick?
Yeah, so starting with Dak, I think he has a great year. I do. I think he's comfortable in the Mike McCarthy system. I think this system was built around what he is comfortable doing, and you saw that really start to turn up after the bye week last year.
Yes.
And I hate that this offense didn't have an opportunity to get on the field in the preseason last year, because I feel like it stunted their growth in the beginning, and they weren't really able to hit that full stride until after the bye week. But when they did, man, it was special. So I think if Dak kind of goes into the season now, going into year 2 in this system, we're able to add a little bit more, grow a little bit more comfort in the things that he was already doing well in. I think he has a good year. Now, as far as numbers go, if it's comparable to last year or anything like that, I think he has a good year. I really do, and I think it's an acceptable year to where we look up in January, and if he has not been re-signed to a long-term deal, then I think Cowboys fans will be comfortable re-signing him to that deal before the playoffs. Then after the playoffs, we could talk and go from there. But playoff success, I think, is going to be the biggest determining factor as to the future of Dak Prescott. Because
Dak and CD go get paid?
I think CD does. CD does for sure. Dak, I think it's a question. For me, my gut feeling is that it gets done after the season.
After the season?
I think it gets done after the season. I think it does. But I think that's just my gut feeling, and it would not surprise me at all if he's in a different uniform next year. It would not surprise me at all.
Breaking news. Yeah.
And I feel like it's – I don't want Cowboys fans to be surprised there, because you look at the roster, right? There are 30 players on this 89-man roster right now that are heading into the final year of their contract. Mike McCarthy is heading into the final year of his contract. Mike Zimmer is going into a 1-year deal. So there's this entire season from the front office perspective is being pushed into 2024. That's where all of the leverage is right now, is this season and what they can do to produce off of this season. I mean, there are so many guys that are heading into the final year of their deal that we're not talking about some really important guys that are heading into the final year of their deal. DeMarcus Lawrence is heading into the final year. Zach Martin is heading into the final year. I mean, there are guys all over the team. You could talk about a lot of guys on this team, but you look at Dak, you look at CD, and you look at Micah going into 2025 on his 5th-year option. So it's interesting. It's a fascinating perspective. Now, my gut feeling for the season.
Yeah.
This is something this is kind of a point I've been toying with, and I feel comfortable saying it now. Going into 2023, I think we could all say that the ceiling for that team was reaching a Super Bowl. Winning the Super Bowl, I don't feel like was the ceiling for that team, at least. That's just my perspective. But I think the ceiling, like them achieving to their standard and maybe even overachieving to a little bit, is reaching the Super Bowl. Is that ceiling lower this year? Absolutely. I mean, you look at the way free agency played out. They lost some key contributors, especially up front. That's going to play a factor. But I think that ceiling is still higher than the peak that they reached last year. I think that ceiling is still reaching an NFC championship game. You look at the NFC picture. I think they are miles behind San Francisco. I think they are going to have to go into San Francisco. I think that's week 7, and really have to prove to me that they can compete with that team, because they didn't prove that last year. But you look behind them, Philly ended the year pitifully last year. Detroit, I still feel like Dallas is the better team, but Detroit definitely could catch them on the wrong day. And then you look at the Rams, maybe they have a lot of playmaking ability, so that's a good team. But I like the Cowboys there in a playoff game. But I think that the 49ers are the only team in the NFC that are, no doubt, no debate, better than the Cowboys. So in my opinion, I think the ceiling for this team is still reaching an NFC championship game and then going from there. And playoffs, you never know what happens then.
Never know what happened. It is just that the Green Bay, they just caught us on a bad day, right? You know.
Never know what happens, right? You never know what happens.
Nick, you in the locker room, you write stories, you be right there with the players. Let me ask you, man, straight up, what the hell happened in that game?
Yeah.
I know we got to go, but I just wanted to ask that, you know.
I think whenever I look back at that game specifically and what exactly happened, I think it started with the defense trailing early, right? Giving up that opening touchdown. And then the first and second quarters just kind of spiraling out of control from a defensive standpoint. And Dak and this offense, while it was strong last year, it never showed that it could play from behind. It never did. And so whenever it had big deficits to overcome in San Francisco and Buffalo, even in that Eagles game where they did lose, it was really tough for them to come back from deficits. So you look at the defensive side of the ball, what went wrong there? I think with Stephon Gilmore's injury and them trying to just push through it, they changed their identity and it cost them. I think they got a little too cute in trying to manage Stephon Gilmore's injury. I think if they could do it all over again, they would have sat Stephon Gilmore for that game and stayed to their identity because they played a lot more zone concepts against those rookie receivers, and those rookie receivers attacked that. Jordan Love attacked that. I mean, Dallas was number one in the NFL in man coverage usage last season, and then they go into that game and their numbers dropped off.
Yeah, they flipped it.
I think I could see Dan Quinn's perspective going into that game being like, look, this is a first-year quarterback. We're going to catch him off guard. We're going to do something we haven't done all season.
Oh, okay.
Without looking at the fact that it was going to not be a benefit to that own system, you know. So I think that eventually spiraled out of control. And then you look, they got back to their identity late in the game, and they were able to finally stop them, but it was well too late by then.
I gotta hit you with this. Got to. It's a big thing for Boss Cowboy to actually say publicly that he drunk Kool-Aid. Listen, I do not drink Kool-Aid without first measuring. And the measured Kool-Aid report goes to Nick Harris.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
All right, so I'm going to give my final words. First of all, Nick, thank you for obviously stopping by the final word. You know, the first time you was really getting going was last year around this time. So I'm going to say to you what's pretty known in the NFL. Your greatest jump is year 2.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
It is fair. It is fair. I appreciate that, man. I appreciate you guys. You guys had me on this show when I didn't have a lot of Cowboys followers, so I appreciate y'all being loyal from day one, too.
Yes, indeed.
No, I appreciate it, man, and just watching you work and watching you grow, you know. So my final words is obviously thank you, and I'm actually pass my final word to you. What was the in the year 1? What was your mama I made it moment?
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a really good one. Oh man, God, you're catching me on the spot here.
Yeah. Take your time. Take your time. Think about it. Because I know you had plenty. You've been in press conferences. You talked to Jared. It's been a lot of stuff that's been like, wow. So we got to hear, what was your mama I made it? Where you like, mama, I got to tell you about today at work.
Yeah.
What's funny is you say that, and the only time I call my mom to say I met somebody, because she's not a big sports fan, she really wouldn't understand some things. I call her when I met Dolly Parton, and she was like, hey, that's pretty cool. And like she grew up on Dolly Parton. But as far as from a Cowboys perspective, oh man, that's tough. I have to give a credit to my mentors because they have done a really good job of communicating to me that whenever you come across these people, that it's work and that they are people just like you are. And so I try to stay as centered and as grounded as possible, you know, around the Jerry Jones of the world or around the Dak Prescotts and whatnot. But man, that's a really good question. That's a really
Shout
good
out to
question.
North Texas. Y'all heard that North Texas training? Listen, I didn't become a fanboy boss. Okay, I just
I was. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. There's still some of that there, but don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I would maybe have to say like the New York game was really special for me last year. Going into MetLife Stadium, week 1, Sunday Night Football. You know, traveling on the team bus, getting to the stadium 4 hours. Meeting Coco Gauff before the game. I'm a big tennis fan, so seeing her on the field pregame was cool. And just that entire night, I think, was my mama I made it moment. And, that was a really cool moment for me.
All right. Yeah. So Nick Harris, he promised us 2. He given us 2. He given us before training camp and during training camp.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
I really appreciate you. So I'm going to go ahead.
Absolutely.
So what's your final words, Nick?
Man, I think this season, I understand that there's not a lot of optimism based on what has happened over the offseason as far as free agency goes and things of that nature. But I think there still should be some confidence that this team can accomplish something. I think anybody would tell you that this team is a playoff team, and I think reaching the playoffs in a fourth consecutive season. If you had told your previous version of yourself in 2019 that could be a reality, you'd be very happy with that. So I say live in the moment, enjoy it. Not everything has to be the end of the world. And even if they do get to the playoffs, I promise you'll wake up in the morning. So that's my final word.
Man, appreciate a great fighter word. Before you give yours, Law, I do want to kick off and say we are coming back Thursday. We have John Machota. He's coming in on Thursday. So he's gonna be the final big time media person that we had. So we had a run as usual. It's a good run always. Where we're talking to, I consider these people the best of the best, right? So when you listening in the press conference, these are the people that you're listening to. These are the people asking the hard questions on the front lines, and they take their time to come talk to all of us as they preparing us what I call right now the calm before the storm. Law corrected me though. It's always a storm in Dallas. So what's your final words, Law?
Well, there's always something, man, just blowing around here in Texas. And hey, man, Nick, I just want to give you your flowers again. Like I said before we hit the live button, you don't do a good job at all, bro. You're not doing a good job. You're doing a great job over there, and we love seeing you glow. We love seeing you grow as well, and continue to do that. But my final word for this particular hour is that Cowboy Nation, this is the time to do your observation. This is the time to make sure that you look in on the back end, like what he said with John Stevens, like what he said with Brevin Spans-Fords, Denzel Daxon, as well as some of the guys like Snoop Connor. We're looking for the underdogs. We're looking for pure competition, not just necessarily the starters. So we're looking at Tiny Deuce Vaughn, seeing if he can step up and do something, right? So we're looking at all of these guys and seeing how they can step up from one year to the next, and hopefully we can figure out this whole complete puzzle on how we can become a better Cowboys team. That's all the time that I have. Salute.
Appreciate that, Nick.
Absolutely, man. Thank
Good
you.
vibes, man. I feel good.
You're doing a great job now.
I just wanna run it up.
All we want to do is run it up.
I've been really in the field, let up, yeah. I've been really in the field, let her rush, I let her feel. Lately, I just wanna run it up. Don't need no deals, I make the deal. Have to take it to a meal. Lately, I just wanna run it up. Yeah. Kinda check the song. Lately, I just wanna run it up. Count that too, count it up. Yeah. Count it up. Lately, I just wanna run it up. Need them ones, I need them fives. Need them tens, I need that change. To the safe, got blues inside. Greens and pinks, it's all the same. I still save and roll my change. Take some losses when I play, charge it to the game. I'm with L, yeah, I'm with T Black, I'm with Revan now. I'm with Bay, yeah, I'm with Jay, yeah, I'm with Chuck and now. Still the same, not switching sides, now it's about loyalty. You switch sides off for the bag, and that's worth more to me.
Let's go.
I mix Nike with designer, I experiment. You just rock what's on the shelf, and I'm not feeling it. Search for the one, but baby girl, it's nothing real as this. Can't trust a soul, I keep a hammer, call it
Too legit.
I've been really in the field, let her rush, I let her feel. Lately, I just wanna run